The lifeline for North Vietnam's war in the South is a 1,500-mile system of mountain paths. It is called the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Through 8 years of intensive bombing, the North Vietnamese struggled to keep open the trail. To fail is to lose the war. The Ho Chi Minh Trail is like a funnel. Men and supplies pour in at the north to emerge at the battlefields in the south. It isn't one trail. It's a network of jungle footpaths and dirt roads, canals and rivers that run generally north to south for 1,500 miles. It is a grueling, perilous journey. The trail begins near the coast, enters the western highlands through a narrow pass, then stretches south along the mountain ridge separating Laos and Vietnam. A Western journalist, Wilfred Burchett, traveled the trail.
It was improved the whole time. At the time when I first started down, it would have taken a good 6 months to get from the 17th parallel down to, say, anywhere close to Saigon. It went through very, very, very rugged, very, very difficult mountainous country and hair-raising sort of little swinging bamboo bridges. And there was no, in those days, there was no way of getting any vehicles down. And then later on, it got better and better and better and wandered in and out of Vietnam and Laos and at some points in the northeast corner of Cambodia as well.
The trail and the Vietnam War develops from 1959 when North Vietnam decides to supply rebels in the south. North Vietnamese strategist Colonel Ho Van Lao.
And it became a network of strategic communications to supply our armed forces in every area of the front. And this strategic route network fulfilled its vital mission in the struggle of our people against local American war in South Vietnam.
By 1964, men and materials depart from organized assembly points along the coast. New jungle paths provide easier access to and through the mountains. Part of the trail runs through neutral Laos, so both sides at first deny there is a ground and air war. Official Air Force film identifies specific targets. Cutting the Ho Chi Minh Trail is seen as the key to ending the war. Ambassador Ellsworth Bunker.
If we cut the trail, the Viet Cong, I felt, would wither on the vine. The only thing that kept it going were supplies, weapons, ammunition from Hanoi.
Both the North Vietnamese infiltration and the retaliatory U.S. airstrikes increased daily. From 1964 to 67, the airstrikes tripled from 2,000 to 7,000 each month. By day, the pilots seldom detect movement. They can only strafe deserted roads and river fords. Gunships are also called in where communist infiltration is detected. Phosphorus bombs and rockets are used to strip away jungle cover. The North Vietnamese defend the trail with elite troops and artillery units. 25,000 North Vietnamese regulars guard the approaches to the trail. The communist defenses are considered too strong to be attacked by ground forces. Instead, the U.S. relies on the most concentrated airstrikes in history and on occasional commando raids. An army of 50,000 laborers keeps troops and trucks moving south, clearing the bombed mountain passes and repairing the bridges.
This strategic road network was permanently maintained by groups of pioneers, of young pioneers, men and women. And of youth groups who were ready at any time to repair the roads immediately after every aerial bombing.
À chaque moment, pour le réparer immédiatement après chaque passage des avions, après chaque bombardement.
Even with the very strict surveillance of the American planes on this road, never was the road cut.
Jamais la route a été coupée.
Despite the bombing, communist infiltration increases year by year. The U.S. military estimate that in 1965, 35,000 North Vietnamese troops moved south. In 1966, 89,000. In 1967, perhaps 90,000. In 1968, 150,000. The trail defenders grow their own food. Their campsites and truck repair depots spaced every few miles under thick jungle canopy. There's strict military discipline on meal times and rationing. Each camp has a medic unit. Some have nurses and surgeons. At key base camps, communist cadres even published their own news of the war. Some American commandos couldn't convince their superiors of the extent of the trail organization.
I always felt that they disregarded whatever information we gave them. Always felt that. Because at times that Ho Chi Minh Trail was so busy, it really was like the Long Island Expressway during rush hour. And anybody that knows that such large amounts of men and materials are moving down, that knows that and doesn't do anything about it, obviously didn't want to win the war. And I'm not just saying my reports. There was a lot of electronic eavesdropping devices that were also dropped all over that trail. And the Air Force knew about it, the Army knew about it, the CIA knew about it, and yet everybody tended to disregard that information in terms of the enemy's capability of launching a full-scale attack.
I used to hear many people back in the States saying, why don't we plug up the Ho Chi Minh Trail? Why don't we just bomb the Ho Chi Minh Trail? Well, it wasn't one trail. I mean, there were thousands of trails. It was a network of thousands of trails, and there were thousands of R&R spots along the way where the enemy troops could seek refuge, build up, and I have to commend them. The NVA were some super soldiers.
The troops moving south stop one day each week at base camps. These provide what the Americans call rest and recreation, R&R. The most popular pastime against Army regulations is keeping diaries. As one captured soldier said, We wrote about the terrain, the scenery. We wrote poems and exchanged our diaries to read. At the height of the war, the journey south takes only 6 weeks, where it once took 6 months. Now they move by truck to assembly areas in North Vietnam and then through jungle passes into the mountains. On leaving the north, they get new clothes and equipment. Then from the supply camps, they start down the trail through Laos. An assessment of them by U.S. Commander General William Westmoreland.
They were a very dedicated group. The training of a North Vietnamese soldier involved more propaganda, indoctrination, than military training. They were tough. Their commanders were well disciplined and well trained, but they were ruthless in demanding strict obedience by the men under them, the men in the ranks. They had a fatalistic attitude where when they moved south, many of them had tattooed on their arms a statement, born in the north to die in the south. There was a great deal of discontent in their ranks, particularly among the very young and of the very old. And there were old men and young men that were drafted into service.
Before leaving, family visits are allowed, but soldiers are instructed not to tell their destination. The tour of duty is indefinite for those who travel south. As the war intensifies, fewer return. A typical day on the trail. They rise at 3:30 a.m., march for at least 10 miles or 10 hours a day. They put up hammocks, dig foxholes, cook and eat dinner, and prepare a rice ball lunch for the following day, the last duty before sleep. The rice ration is a pound or two a day. Luxury is a fish caught by tossing a grenade into a stream. On the march, they must carry 75 to 85 pounds on their backs. Their army kit, 3 shirts, 3 pairs of trousers, a raincoat, and a nylon tent. A few will take up permanent duty defending the trail. Tens of thousands die on the trail from the physical hazards of the journey. Eyewitness Wilfred Burchett.
Medical problems were rather bad, especially malaria. Malaria, and some intestinal and respiratory things, but mainly malaria. But they had a very good production of medicines going by that time, both locally in South Vietnam. They had their little jungle clinics, and they had a pretty good pharmaceutical service in Vietnam, in North Vietnam. And everybody started out with whatever it was necessary, the prophylactic stuff against malaria of their own production. And one thing that was absolutely essential, which everybody had to carry, I also carried them, were sort of dice-sized cubes against a snake bite. It was a local remedy. If you got bitten by a snake, you broke the thing in two, clapped it on the one half on the actual bite, and swallowed the other half. You had to do it within 3 minutes. It was a death adder, because otherwise you would be stiffened up.
In late 1968, the U.S. prepares for a gradual troop withdrawal and begins an all-out attempt to stop communist infiltration. Airstrikes against the trail tripled to 200 each day. Bombing of the trail increases the cost of this air war to $1 billion each year. In total, the U.S. loses 500 planes over the trail. American High Command claims success on the ground. 25,000 trucks are destroyed on the trail in one 7-month period. But it becomes clear that bombing the trail cannot stop the North Vietnamese war machine. The trail by now is a sophisticated communication system.
In the beginning, it was a very, very miserable sort of collection of trails. Gradually, it became a major, more or less, highway, accompanied with a parallel pipeline. For the big offensive in '75, they were getting their fuel pumped down just to wherever they needed it. So it was absolutely decisive from beginning to end.
By late 1968, U.S. intelligence reports that 10,000 trucks are using the trail at any one time. The trucks operate in relays, traveling 40-mile stretches. Each section has its own repair crews, supply dumps, and fuel depots. The vehicles are kept strung out along a grid system of vertical and horizontal paths. When one route is bombed, the column of trucks switches to a side path. A labor gang immediately repairs the bombed section. New technology is tried. Sensors are dropped to pick up the movement of men and vehicles leaving the trail. The exit routes become a little easier to detect. But finally, it all comes back to the village level. Here, reliable information is hard to get. Despite controversy, more defoliants are used to destroy jungle cover in the lowlands. According to the Pentagon, by 1967, the communist convoys deliver 60 tons of supplies a day to the south. It is enough to sustain the war. Food, weapons, and ammunition are dispersed to hundreds of small units in the countryside. American reliance on large-scale attacks is criticized by Special Forces soldier Dave Christian.
They were trying to fight a guerrilla war with conventional methods. And they were fighting a defensive war. And so they had all these support troops and all these support mechanisms. And everyone, you had Signal Corps over there, you had all these different things that I'm sure were needed, okay, and were probably used in World War II. Possibly in Korea, but they were outdated and outmoded in Vietnam. Mainly you take your large infantry outfits, the guys that are fighting the war. The reason you don't come into contact is they make so damn much noise. Walking through the jungle, you'd think it was a herd of elephants coming. And if I had a team of guerrilla fighters, 8 to 10 people, I would not engage with that large of a group.
Unable to block the trail, the American command concentrates on the exits. The Iron Triangle, a 40-square-mile area north of Saigon, is a major infiltration point. General Westmoreland defends large conventional operations.
War Zone C was a heavily forested area north and west of Saigon along the Cambodian border. And it was, the Vietnamese, before we arrived, would never dare go in there because it was totally dominated by the enemy. The enemy had great tunnel complexes in there. They had their headquarters well dug in and camouflaged. They had their supply dumps there. And it was necessary for the sake of protecting the pacification effort and for preempting their capability of moving into the populated areas, for us to go in and to disrupt that. But you couldn't go in with a platoon, you couldn't go in with companies, or you couldn't go in with battalions. They would have been chewed up. They would have been ambushed and decimated. And therefore, it took a massive troop efforts to go in there with safety and get the job done with minimum losses. And that was done.
Westmoreland prefers a direct attack on the trail, but Washington rejects this. It would require 4 infantry divisions at a time when the U.S. is seeking to withdraw troops. Instead, the military launched massive operations against communist base areas. A field commander, General William Depew.
There were operations which were called search and destroy. It turns out that was an unfortunate choice of words. What it meant back in 1964, long before it became unpopular, was simply that U.S. units or Vietnamese airborne units or Marine units would patrol in the jungle, not in the cities, not in the towns, in order to try to find the main force units, search for them, find them, fight them, and destroy them. Later, I guess it became associated with pictures of troops searching villages and setting them on fire, and the word destroy became a dirty word.
In a typical operation, helicopter units make a surprise descent on suspect villages. In operational areas, villages are considered base camps. The people are presumed to be communist supporters and are often forcibly evacuated to government camps. For most of the war, North Vietnamese infiltration via the Ho Chi Minh Trail enables them to control at least 60% of South Vietnam's countryside.
Leave the rice and bring the documents back with you. And call 6 India.
Homes are searched for weapons and documents, then often burned to prevent any use as communist sanctuaries. U.S. forces, though having greater mobility, rely on in-and-out tactics, seldom holding the terrain. When American forces withdraw, the straw huts and the communists soon reappear. Known communist villages are bulldozed and the cropland leveled. But across the countryside, the communists develop underground hideouts linked to the trail. They regard the trail as their route to victory. As the Ho Chi Minh Trail develops, so does the legend of the guerrilla fighters. An image of them from soldier Tim O'Brien.
Around 12 o'clock at night, for example, we would group up, maybe, we worked usually in a company of maybe 100 men, and roughly a half of those would group up at midnight and sometimes darken our faces. We'd throw our helmets off because helmets were useless. They impaired hearing at night. They were heavy. It was hard to march with them. We'd throw everything aside except our rifles, our ammunition, a canteen of water, a claymore, and a radio, essentially, and begin zigzagging through this ghost land we call Vietnam. It was eerie. There was almost a mythology about Vietnam among the soldiers, that the land was populated by ghosts. We called the Viet Cong ghosts in my element, platoon. You know, the ghosts are out tonight. The ghosts will get us tonight. It wasn't very often Charlie. It was ghosts. And that ghostly feeling was there. It was like a wonderland. It was like Ichabod Crane riding through Sleepy Hollow at midnight. Trees seemed to be moving, seemed to be actually lifting off the ground, wavering, shimmying. The wonderland, we called it. Ghostland, we called it. There was a feeling that the Viet Cong, because we called them ghosts, and because they were so ghostly, you never saw them. You'd see a shot of flame as they shoot at you. You might see a shadow very rarely. But they seemed to be capable of incredible things. There was mythology that they could crawl through barbed wire, that they were immune to barbed wire. They were capable of supernatural sorts of things, so we thought, and so it seemed. And an image of the enemy began to grow, of an enemy capable of the most incredible sorts of deeds.